Welcome, new and old friends. My name is 242, and 2 got us one story. Joining me today is Raven from As the Raven Dreams, and Dodge from Dodge This 82. Both of their links to their channels will be in the notes. Please make sure you've watched I Was Never Allowed in the Basement Part 1 before you watch this. Now, turn off your lights, make sure your doors and windows are locked. Things are about to get spooky. The local priest would always say to those of us in his congregation that if we sinned, then one day we'd end up in the pit. Everyone thought he meant hell, but today we learned about the fresh, mass grave found at the edge of our town. I was never allowed in the basement. I finally found out why. Part 2. By FleetSteps.
No.
Tom whispered, his face now white as a ghost. The ambulance sirens were growing in volume. We had to go now. I wasted no time in pushing Tom towards the stairs, poking the gun barrel into his back.
Aaron, you need to stop this. I can't go back. You have no idea what was happening when we left. We will die.
Tom's voice was almost a whisper as he pleaded with me. We crossed from the top of the stairs into the threshold of the hallway, and I was shocked to see Mary's arm had stopped bleeding. She was now lying down in a pool of blood, her long, dark hair soaked with crimson. Her breathing was short and shallow, and her eyes were wide open but still turned into the back of her head, the whites of them facing into the ceiling. Seeing her in this state was painful, and it took everything I had not to stay with her. The only way I could help her now was to keep going with my plan. I shoved Tom through the hallway and out the back door towards the shed. His begging had turned into stoic silence. Neither of us said anything as we approached the shed. Every few feet, I had to shove him forward as his feet dragged along. The only sound being the shrill of the sirens, louder each second. I looked back towards the house, the front road and driveway not visible from this angle. If I had to guess, they were going to reach the house any second now. My hope was the ambulance would rush Mary to the emergency room, and there the doctors might be able to slow down the virus and buy me some extra time. I stumbled into Tom as he froze like a statue in the doorway and began to speak.
Kid, there's something about all this I haven't told you. The device, it can't correctly account for temporal variance. It was just a prototype and it never got figured out. You hear me? I'm saying I don't know what year we'll be coming out. And if against all fucking odds we make it back, I don't know what year it will be here. We got here 5 years after we left in my world. I don't even know for sure if this damn thing still works, and if we'll be going to the right place. You need to stop this before you get us both killed.
I considered Tom's words for a moment. If what he was saying was true, then this whole thing could be less than hopeless. But he could just as easily be lying to avoid going back to his world. I'll take our chances, I told him, while simultaneously shoving him the rest of the way into the shed. The orb was still sitting on the work table, now devoid of any color other than opaque, milky white that seemed to signify the off mode. Tom stood there, not moving a muscle. I'm not going to say this again, Tom. I will fucking shoot you right now to save her. You might be a coward who's willing to let May die, but I'm not. I won't, and I don't want to hurt you, But you need to take us there now, I exclaimed. Now, I could hear voices coming from the house. It wouldn't be long until the first responders and police were swarming the property. Tom let out a resigning sigh before picking up the device. When he did so, it came to life and swirled with beautiful shades of orange that remind me of a cloudless sunset. Foreign symbols suddenly appeared around the orb, and Tom began tapping them in a sequence. When he seemed to be done, Tom turned to face me. He stood staring at me for a moment before looking back at the orb and tapping a few more symbols. Tom removed his hand from the orb, and to my amazement, it hung there, suspended in midair.
Last chance, kid.
I forcefully dug the gun into his back. Tom said nothing and placed a finger onto the orb and gave it a quick spin. The orb swirled with color and it began to spin faster and faster until it became a blur. The air pressure in the shed changed, the heat began to emanate from it. The temperature of the room quickly rose.
Stand close, kid. When you feel yourself go, expel all the air from your lungs. It ain't fun, and it hurts real bad,
Tom told me. I inched slightly closer to the spinning orb, but the heat coming from it felt like it was searing my face. I was beginning to sweat now, and still the orb seemed to spin impossibly faster. A roaring that came everywhere filled my ears, and I felt dizzy. I thought I could hear Tom praying, but the deep roaring was so loud I wasn't sure. Suddenly, every atom in my body screamed with pain. It was like someone was sticking every single bit of my body with white, hot knives and twisting them for good measure. I screamed. My vision started to fade to black, and I exhaled deeply. And then, falling. But I wasn't falling through the air, just falling through nothing, a void. The pain stopped as quickly as it had come, and the sensation of peace filled my being. Blissfully, nothingness continued. It just went on, falling through an infinity of nothingness for eternity. Maybe it went on for seconds, or minutes, or days, or years. Maybe it never happened at all. I remembered where I was, what was happening. I attempted to breathe, but it was like trying to breathe underwater. The calmness that had come over me was replaced with panic. Finally, just as I thought I'd suffocate, I could feel a breeze gently flow by me, and I opened my mouth to gulp in the cool air. Impact. My head bounced as my back collided into the ground. The gun that I had been holding was knocked out of my hand, and the whole world faded to black. Sometime later, I regained consciousness and felt a sharp pain where my head had collided with the ground. I opened my eyes and could see a sunny blue sky above me. The sky seemed a brighter blue than normal, actually. Slowly, I turned my head over and realized that I was laying in tall grass of a meadow. Surrounding the meadow, there was a thick forest of trees. I sat up, still struggling to take full breaths. Fortunately, though, it didn't feel like I broke anything. Looking around, I saw Tom laying face first in the tall grass a few feet from me, and the orb sat on the ground between us. "Tom?" I asked. My heart began to race as Tom didn't respond. "Tom?" I asked again, urgency beginning to fill my voice. I pushed the grass out of my face as I crawled closer to him. I flipped him over onto his back and began to shake him to no response. Dread began to set in. There was no way I'd be able to survive here without Tom. If he was dead, then I was beyond fucked, and so was May. Suddenly he groaned and his body began to shift slightly. He was alive, thank God. Relief fled over me as his eyes snapped open. "Jesus, I thought you were dead," I said as I helped him sit up.
Might as well be,
he muttered.
We'll both be dead within the day.
He narrowed his icy gaze at me, and I began to reply before I was cut off by a loud, animalistic howl in the trees at the far end of the meadow. followed by what sounded like running. Tom and I both froze as a gargantuan horse the size of an elephant burst from the trees into the far side of the meadow. I remember seeing the photo of my papa riding one of these creatures.
We bred them to be much larger here,
Tom commented as the horse galloped away. Something wasn't right, though. What spooked it? I wondered aloud. As if on cue, 3 humanoid creatures came crashing into the meadow on all fours, bounding after the horse. My heart sank as I immediately recognized them to be the same type of creature as Jade. These were much larger, though, and they seemed to be in much better shape. They howled gleefully as they closed in on their prey. Tom threw his hands over my chest and brought us both back against the ground, trying to hide us in the tall grass that surrounded us. He looked at me and brought a finger to his lips, indicating silence, as if I dared to make a sound right now. We heard the screams of pain that could only be the horse getting caught. It called out in agony for several minutes. I felt terrible, but there was nothing to be done. After what felt like forever, the horse cries finally stopped, and then only the sound of tearing flesh was left. Just as I started to think that maybe I'd make it out alive, my phone began to buzz my pocket and my morning alarm chimed through the air. I had 2 thoughts at this moment. The first was that at least half a day had passed since we left. The second thought was that I was going to die, right now. Tom looked at me with a mix between fury and terror, and my hands fumbled as I attempted to silence my phone. After several long seconds, I managed to stop the alarm. I turned my head towards where the creatures had been, and to my dismay, all 3 stood straight up and motionless, staring at me. Their faces were soaked in blood, and they had a ravenous, predatory look in their eyes. The tallest of them was easily over 9 feet tall, and I cringed as its brown eyes met mine. It opened its mouth in a twisted version of a smile to reveal its long, yellow canines. Suddenly, it began to scream, followed by the other 2. The sound was horrid, but just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. It snapped its jaw shut and got back down on all fours, still staring at me.
Fuck,
I heard Tom say from behind me. At the sound of Tom's voice, the creatures began to sprint towards us with impossible speed, their skin bulging with dense muscles as they bounded towards us, thrilled with the notion of fresh prey. I had to agree with Tom. Fuck. From movies and TV, I've always heard your life flashes before your eyes when you're about to die. Time supposedly moves down to less than a crawl, and everything you've ever experienced runs through your brain at lightning speed. Maybe as universe's way of rewarding you for a happy life, letting you live it all one last time, or punishing you if you've lived a bad one. In my case, as the mutant creature sprinted towards Tom and me at an impossible speed, time did move down to a crawl. However, instead of my entire life replaying, my only thoughts were of my sister May, laying mutilated and unconscious on the floor of our house, awaiting her inevitable transformation into one of these creatures that was now going to end my life. The creature closest to me had its mouth open, and I could see its long canines were stained red with blood. It was only about 30 meters away now, and I knew outrunning it would be hopeless. But still, humans were the product of eons of evolution, and buried deep inside all of us is a survival instinct that keeps us alive throughout history, and will keep you fighting until the very end, even against insurmountable odds, even against 3 impossible monsters whose only purpose is to kill. I jumped up and faced the creatures. "Run!" I screamed to Tom. Glancing over, I saw he was already booking into the tree line. I didn't have time to see whether he had made it though, because the closest mutant had closed the distance to me. As it lunged towards my neck, I attempted to dive out of the way. By mere inches, I managed to avoid the creature's teeth, and my body slammed into the ground, knocking the air from my lungs. With no time to react, I felt my body being violently hoisted up by my arm. My shoulder ripped out of its socket with a sickening pop, as the mutant dangled me in front of its face. I screamed in agony and fear as it brought my head closer to its mouth, which was open unnaturally wide. Hot, putrid breath filled my screaming mouth, and I could see bits of flesh dangling between its teeth. Behind the one that held me, I could see the other two had reached us and were circling us in excitement. Tom was nowhere to be found. Acting on pure instinct, I did the only thing I could do. I pulled my head back, and then, with all the force I could gather, I smashed my forehead into the creature's long nose. It was like slamming into concrete. Blood began to pour down my head, and I saw stars. However, my headbutt had done the trick. The creature let out an annoyed yip and tossed me away from it, sending me careening through the air. I landed face down on the ground, sending yet another wave of pain through my body. Blood filled my mouth and gushed out my likely broken nose. Using my good arm, I began to crawl. I felt my hand come in contact with smooth metal, and despite everything, I gave a small smile. A faint sliver of hope started to grow in my mind as my finger closed around the gun that I had dropped when we first arrived. Forgetting the wave of agony that shredded through me every time I moved, I flipped my body over and sent a bullet straight at the mutant that was now towering over me. The bullet ripped through the top of its mouth and exited out its long nose, but it didn't kill it. Instead, the mutant screamed as it reared back to land a blow on me. Before I could shoot again, the creature's head exploded, and the sound of what seemed like thunder cracked through the meadow. The body dropped lifeless in front of me. The other two creatures howled at this and glared at me with vicious hatred. Another deafening boom split through the air, and the mutant closest to me had its arm and majority of its torso blown away. Although they were probably 20 feet away from me, I felt hot blood and bits splatter across my face. Before I could understand what was happening, the other mutant began to sprint away towards the tree, completely forgetting about me. Again, a boom sounded and the mutant's leg nearly tore off, only held together by strings of flesh. The creature fell forward and rolled, laying out a terrified scream as it began to frantically pull itself towards the tree line. Finally, one more boom rang out, and the mutant dropped dead as the hole the size of a dinner plate appeared in its torso. For a moment, there was an eerie silence that filled the area. I was alive. Tom! Tom! My voice sounded harsh in the total silence, and blood filled my mouth, making it difficult to speak. The world came alive again as several dark gray figures materialized from the tree line. My heart jumped at the thought of more mutants entering the meadow, but I was quickly relieved once I recognized them to be human. My vision was blurry from pain and fatigue, but they seemed to be wearing dark gray body armor with helmets that covered their faces. They were distinctly military and almost looked like stormtroopers. I would have laughed if I hadn't almost just died. There was about 20 soldiers or so, and most of them were holding what seemed to be gray assault rifle versions of the pistol I still held in my hand. But two of them were holding what looked like a cross between a cannon and a sniper rifle with large folding tripod attached to the fronts. Those must be what had made the thunder sound. As the soldiers were closing in on me, I could tell they were saying something, but I couldn't quite make out what. They stopped several yards away and raised their guns at me.
Put your weapon down now!
I realized I was still holding the pistol and dropped it to the ground. They kept their guns leveled at me and began to move closer before abruptly stopping again.
Blood on him. Medic, up front.
The leader soldier called out in a female voice. I noticed she had a black stripe down her shoulder pieces. Shit! I had completely forgot about the creature's blood hitting my face when the soldiers had killed it. Terror began to rip through my body as I remember what Tom had told me. The infection spread with fluids. I was pretty sure none had got in my mouth or my eyes, but it had all happened fast and I couldn't be positive.
On it.
One of the soldiers moved forward from the back. As he approached me, I noticed he was carrying a small duffel bag. The soldier knelt down in front of me, tossing my pistol back towards the others, who were still pointing their guns at me. He opened the bag and removed a small case, which he then flipped open. Inside was the largest syringe I've ever seen, filled with a faintly yellow liquid. Now, I consider myself a fairly brave person, but there's something about needles that have always fucked with me. And this needle was gigantic. I had been silent until this point, but I'd be damned if someone was just going to jam me with a needle without my permission. What the fuck is that? No fucking way! I yelled, desperately trying to pull away. The soldier didn't respond, and instead, I felt his fist collide with my jaw, knocking me to the ground. Putting all of his weight on me, he dug his elbow into my back before I felt the needle pinch into the base of my neck. In my pitiful state, there wasn't much I could do to fight back. As quickly as it happened, the soldier was off me, and I lay there in the grass, breathing heavily.
He's clear, ma'am.
Announced the soldier that had stuck me with the needle. It dawned on me that I may have just been injected with a cure. My mind raced as the possibility of using it for May. I noticed the soldiers had started to fan out a bit and were inspecting the meadow and the bodies of the mutants they had killed, although a few had stayed with their guns still on me. I turned towards the soldier that seemed to be in charge. "Thank you for saving me. Please, did you see another man here? My great uncle was with me and..." She held up a hand to cut me off.
Colonel Braddis of the NUSR. We picked up an energy signature from this location. Tell me what happened here.
She commanded in an authoritative voice. I also noticed she had the exact same southern accent as Tom. I opened my mouth to talk before closing it again. Despite saving my life moments ago, she didn't seem as though she wanted to help me. I had a strong feeling that I shouldn't be too open with her about my origins.
Don't make me say it again,
she said in a sinister tone. Before I could think of a convincing lie, her attention was drawn away from me and to another soldier.
Ma'am?
I turned my attention towards the soldier and saw with dismay that he was picking up the orb. The colonel stared at it for a moment before removing her helmet and handing it to another soldier. I couldn't see her face since her back was to me, but her short blonde hair covered her head. She stared at the orb for a few more moments before finally turning around to face me. A ravenous smile plastered across her face. Now that I could see her, I would have considered her pretty if she wasn't so fucking terrifying. She was probably late 30s, her hair almost goldish white, that I didn't think existed in my universe. And her eyes were light amber color that bore into my being.
Now, just where did you get that?
She asked in a clear, fake, sweet voice. I kept my mouth shut, and her fake smile was replaced by a quick flash of anger before she went on.
If you'd believe it, I used to have one of those before it got stolen. Someone took it from me before leaving us all to die almost 10 years ago. He took a few people with him. And I just kept wondering where they all got off to.
I kept my face as emotionless as possible, returning her angry stare with what I hoped was equal intensity. Though I'm sure it wasn't, seeing as how fucked up and broken I was. She considered me for a few more moments before switching back to her overzealous grin, revealing a set of pristine white teeth as she continued on in her fake, sweet voice.
Let's start over. Huh? You said you was looking for someone, right? Your great uncle? Well, I think he and I might have a few things to talk about.
Jacob was skimming the pages of his favorite horror novel. Upon turning the last page, he was sucked in, and the creature he so dreadfully feared became his reality. Thank you again, Raven and Dodge, for helping me tell this story. They both helped me greatly to bring these characters to life. Again, if you'd like to check them out, the links are in the description. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and make sure it feels it. If you're a new friend, become an old friend by subscribing and turning that pretty little bell to all notifications. If you'd like to find everything out about me and my channel, there is a tree link down below. It has links to my Patreon, my merch, my socials, and my podcast. And of course, there's a few other little goodies there too. And now we're going to do the Sunday word. Last week's word was distant, and we're going to go in reverse. PA Nightmares wrote, "This story was amazing. I will fill my jugs with the delicious red Kool-Aid that can only be found at Red Creek Town. That Kool-Aid guy has been keeping his distance ever since I kneecapped him the last time he came crashing through my wall. Oh no!" Nice one, PA. Very well tied back to the story. Thank you so much. King of Canadian Hill wrote, "Distant enough to miss the premiere that I wanted to see. Glum silence tells a tale that keeps you in a detective mood the whole story. Your voice narration at different octaves is getting better and better in every new video 42. Great work." Thank you, King, and I'm very happy you enjoyed this story. I really did enjoy telling that one. Infinite Psychosis wrote, "I woke up and the sun was gleaming, and my body was still steaming. First I thought I still was dreaming, till I seen the distant demons." Thank you so much, Infinite. That was really cool. I really enjoyed reading that one. Derringer wrote, "Distant stars come in black or red. I've seen the worlds inside my head. They connect with the fall of man. They breathe you in and dive as deep as they can." Thank you, Derringer. I really did enjoy reading that, even if it is a song by a band. But hey, you know what? You thought of something, that was really cool. I really enjoyed reading it. As the Raven Dreams wrote, 2 days from now feels so distant when you have no AC and are sweating a lot. It's so hot. And I know for the worst part, A is still waiting from when I recorded this. I really hope you get your AC fixed real soon, Raven. Last but never least, Anime wrote, "How distant are Timbits from me, you ask? Too far." Yes, they're very far for you, Anime. They're very close for me, and I try not to eat them too much because they're too good, and I can sit there and eat a whole whack of them way too fast. But thank you, Anime. I really love that. And for this week, our word is talented. The meaning is having a natural aptitude or skill for something. So I hope you talented lot will rate me something down below with this tantalizing word. But as always, thank you guys for watching and listening and commenting and everything you guys are doing. It's really awesome. Thank you guys. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.